with that, we turn to our keynote lecture. So it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Liz Bentley, one of the UK's most respected meteorologists and a leading voice in science communication. Over her career, Liz has worked across some of the country's most influential scientific and public institutions, from the Met Office and the BBC Weather Centre to the Ministry of Defence. She's been Chief Executive of the Royal Meteorological Society for more than a decade and was awarded a professorship by the University of Reading in recognition of her leadership and impact. Drawing on a career shaped by both scientific and expertise and public engagement, Liz will speak today about one of the most pressing challenges facing the scientific community: how we communicate effectively about science. I can see all the staff heading that way. Oh, you are there. I just wondered if they're all looking for you. But they're not. Liz.
Will it just follow?
I think it just follows. Oh no, that's thank you.
Oh.
Right. Liz?
Just for a second, it's like that. It's just behind.
I'll come this way. Right, you wait.
Thank you. It should be adjusted and behind. Oh. Oh, we might need the technician. I'll leave it. Leave that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And, well, it's an honour to be here tonight to talk to you about climate and weather. I think you would expect nothing else from me at the Royal Meteorological Society to give you an overview, particularly around communicating some of the challenges, particularly with climate change. So I will take you through a set of slides. It's been great, really, to be here and listen to some of not only the presentations earlier, some really inspiring presentations, but also to listen to the award winners as well, to see, recognition celebrating science. And my focus of the talk today really is thinking about communicating science, but with impact. And I think that's really important when we communicate around climate change, that we have that impact, we can make that impact. And I hope to do that this evening. Clicker. No movement. I have a dot. Sorry. So am I using this or the clicker? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I've split my talk into 4 sections this evening. So I'm going to start off by looking at the changing communication landscape that exists, not just in meteorology, but elsewhere. I'm then going to take you through a couple of recent public attitude surveys, particularly one looking at science and then the second one looking at climate change, so a little bit more focused on my area. And then the third area, and probably the bulk of the talk, I'll be looking at some of the work that we do at the Royal Meteorological Society with a focus on our climate change communication training. And I'm going to take you through some examples of the kind of things we include on that training to hopefully inspire you to take away from this. I'll also run through some of the reports and papers that we publish to support climate communication and some of the education and outreach activities. And then I'll conclude with just some final thoughts to leave you with as a takeaway. Let's start, though, with a quote from Sir Mark Walpole. So this basically is saying that science isn't finished until it's communicated. And that's where the real impact comes, I think, with science. So good science needs to be communicated effectively to have that impact. But it is a changing landscape. We know that. We've seen that shift quite rapidly for a number of reasons over recent years. We see more information overload, making it much harder for audiences to distinguish expertise from opinion. There's a lot of misinformation. It's rife across particularly social media, but coming through more established media channels as well. There's mistrust in institutions. That's certainly on the rise, whether those are political institutions, some media institutions, and even some scientific institutions. There are social media algorithms that amplify emotion rather than accuracy. There's a polarization that means many people engage through values rather than data. And there are public perceptions that are higher than ever, looking for us to give clear, transparent, and empathetic communication. Science communication has never been more challenging, but it is fundamental that we get that right to have the impact. So let me look at the two public attitude surveys. And the first one focuses on science. So this is a survey that was done by UKRI, Ipsos, and BSA. And this is something that's done roughly every 3 to 5 years. So you can see in the graph there some of the results from previous years. And the current survey is taking place at the moment, should be published hopefully in due course. So question mark of what will come out in 2025. And this is the first one that's been done since COVID. So it will be really interesting to see how that data changes over that time. But let me draw your attention to the blue line at the top. And hopefully I can use the red dot. So the graph is highlighting that, particularly the blue line on the graph is highlighting that there is trust in science and scientists. Yet the survey went on to show that there is proactive engagement is a lot lower. So people are really wanting to engage with the science, but really don't know what to do with it. So this is where the importance of having that impact to turn that science through communication into action. And that came out quite clearly in this public attitude survey. The second public attitude survey I wanted to highlight is one that's done roughly every 3 times a year. So it used to be done 4 times a year. If you look back to the beginning in 2021 on this graph, you can see there was one in autumn, winter, spring, summer. Now it's just done in spring, summer and winter. So there were 3 of these done each year. And it's completed by the Department of Energy, Security and Net Zero, DESNZ, and it's their regular public attitude survey. So the graphs here, the middle line is showing where the percentage of people that were surveyed are very concerned about climate change. The line at the top includes the very concerned, but also fairly concerned. So you can see there's a high percentage of the population are concerned or very or fairly concerned about climate change. The red line at the bottom highlights the people who have no real concern around climate change. And there are 2 things to show. Obviously, there are many more people, much higher percentage of people who are concerned about climate change than those that aren't. But there is a trend. If you look over particularly the last year or so, we've seen a slight decrease in the number of people who are concerned and an opposite effect going on with those who are not concerned about climate change. And this is really important. So again, it emphasises the need to communicate the impacts of climate change much more clearly. So people are much more aware of the changes that we're already seeing in our climate, but also to empower them to be able to do something about it. So the meteorological community, I think, offers a unique test case for communication. So weather is all around us. It's something we hear and see about every day. So everyone is an end user of meteorological information, whether that's weather or climate information. We also do a lot of probabilistic communication. So having to explain uncertainty that's there in the forecast, for example, without reducing trust for that information. We also intersect in everybody's daily lives. As I say, the weather impacts pretty much everything we can and can't do. So it impacts on our daily lives and sometimes our personal values as well. But it is a highly politicized topic, especially when we focus on climate change, on net zero, on climate adaptation. And so there's a lot we can learn from this. There are challenges here within the meteorological community that I think mirror other scientific fields as well. So I'll look and focus in on meteorology, but I think there are things that we can take away for other science fields as well. So the Royal Meteorological Society, so we're an independent authoritative voice around weather and climate. We play a really key role ourselves in communicating climate change and meteorology as a wider subject. But we recognise that we are a small organisation and we have limited reach. So a few years ago, we decided with our communication strategy that not only would we continue to communicate around climate change, we would empower communicators to do that job for us as well. So communicators who have much wider, much larger audiences than we do at the Royal Meteorological Society. And so that's what we did. And one of the activities that we developed was our climate change communication training, with 3 areas that we aim to do. So on the left-hand side, you can see here, we wish to engage that audience, we want to educate them, but ultimately we want to empower people. And the training started about 7 years ago, and it came about when there was editorial change within a lot of the broadcasting companies in the UK. So, for example, if you go back, say, 10 years, if I ever went on to do an interview around climate change, I would be put on against a climate skeptic, and we would have to discuss about whether climate change was real. And both the climate scientist and the climate skeptic were given equal weight at equal time to discuss that. But things moved on. The science was fully accepted, and so there was no need to have that climate skeptic to question whether climate change was real. The science was there, and the conversation moved on to much more focus about why is climate changing, what will be the impacts of climate change, and what can we do about it. And so we ended up with a number of people, a large body of people in communication roles who had been told, I guess, for years not to engage around climate change, just to stick to the facts of, say, weather. So if there was a hurricane happening, they could go on and talk about that particular hurricane and why hurricanes form, but you wouldn't go on to additional conversation around, has climate change had an impact on this hurricane? Are hurricanes becoming more extreme because of climate change? And so you had this group of communicators who then were being encouraged, strongly encouraged, to go on and talk about climate change. And so we came in to help them to do that, to give them an update in the science, to give them some of the key responses in order to answer some of those tricky questions, and ultimately to give them the confidence to talk around climate change. And so the next few slides, I'm going to take you through some of the topics that we would cover as part of this training course, and hopefully educate and inspire and empower you as well. So let's start with engage, and I think probably the easiest one for me here tonight, because I have a ready-made audience sat in front of me and hopefully, engaging enough to take you through the next few slides. But one example that we tend to use to engage members of the general public or people who want to talk about climate change are to talk about the warming stripes. And I have my scarf on today, and I will often wear this when I go out, particularly if I'm doing any sort of public speaking, because it starts that conversation. So these are called warming stripes, and I've put this on the slide you can see here. And every vertical line on this slide represents 1 year from 1850 on the left through to current day on the right. The blue lines represent cold years, and the more orange and red lines represent warmer years. So it's really visually clear, without putting any numbers or graphs or any further information. It's really clear that we can see our climate has changed. Specifically, it has warmed during that time from 1850, but particularly in the last few decades, we've seen significant warming in our climate. And so the warming stripes are a really powerful tool, I think, to help anybody visualize how our climate is changing. And it starts that engagement, it starts that conversation. Once you've engaged with someone, then you have the opportunity to educate. So the next few slides, I'm just going to take you through a range of things that we would cover on the course that would help to educate people. So the first one, and a question we often get asked is, so we talk about global average temperatures changing by 1 or 1.5 degrees, which sounds a very small number. You know, I don't think we would notice a change of 1 degree in this room or outside. And people say, well, it's so small. Why is that so important? Why is that having an impact? So here is a curve that shows a climatology of somewhere. It could be here in London, giving a range of the temperatures that exist. So most of the temperatures sit within the middle range of this graph in here. And then if we go out to the cold end, you see the tail drops away quite quickly. So there are fewer cold and even fewer extreme cold events on the left. And on the right, you see there are fewer heat events and even fewer extreme heat events. So that's a typical climate that might have existed. If we shift that curve slightly by that 1 or 1.5 degree to the right, what you'll notice is the tail on the left has dropped away significantly. So we now have many fewer cold events and hardly any extreme cold events. In contrast to that, on the right-hand side, we have many more heat events happening. In fact, they're becoming more normal to have these heat events. And the number of extreme heat events has also gone up significantly. So that small change in global average temperature is leading to a much larger change in the frequency of extreme heat events or decrease in the number of cold events. So it's a really kind of useful visual to show how small changes in average temperature lead to a big change in extremes. The other analogy we like to use when we talk about these small temperature changes is just to think about the temperature of our bodies. So, you know, we're healthy and fit and feel comfortable if our body temperature is around about 37 degrees. But if it goes just a degree or so above that or below that, then we start to feel unwell. So we'll go into, if it goes above, we go into fever. If we go below, we go towards hypothermia, only by changing a small amount by 1 or 1.5 degrees. And so it's a really good analogy that, if we change the global average temperature of on Earth by just 1 or 1.5 degrees, it's like changing our own body temperature by that amount. We start to feel unwell, and that's what's happening with our planet. Okay, question time for you now. So here are 9 charts showing summers, and some of them, 8 of them are from recent summers that we've had in the UK, and one of them is from 1976. And there will be some of you in the audience who are old enough like me to remember the summer of 76. I grew up in Yorkshire. Not only was it a heat wave, but we had a prolonged drought. We had no running water in the house. We had to go out and get water on standpipes out in the road. It was a pretty extreme summer. And so one of these 9 charts is from the summer of 1976. And what each of these charts is showing is the summer temperature. It's called an anomaly. It's basically the temperature above average. So the reds and pinks are below average, and the blues, and there's 1 or 2 blues on some of the charts, are below average. So have a guess which one you think might be 1976. Sorry? Well done. How did you know?
I was there.
So let me zoom out, and you will see, you're correct, sir, that the middle one was 1976. And it's much more obvious when we zoom out and look at the globe, because 1976 sticks out like a sore thumb. You can see that the UK and the near continent has a very localized heat wave taking place, but pretty much the rest of the globe is either average or below average temperatures. The other 8 summers that were happening, you can see pretty much all red. There's a little bit of blue on there. Our climate has changed. This is the new norm, where we see above average temperatures year after year after year, and it's going up. Whereas 76 was a very unusual summer. Very extreme, now is the norm. I'm now going to move on to tipping points. And I think this is a subject that hasn't really had much coverage in the media. And I'd really like to just spend a few minutes trying to take you through particularly one tipping point that will have quite a significant impact on the UK. This might shock quite a few of you. Okay, so what is a tipping point? So here we have a climatological situation, which is reasonably steady. You can see the graph here, it's oscillating about a little bit. And as our climate changes, what happens is this hump starts to disappear. So you'll see it just lowers slightly until eventually this climatological situation flips. And it moves into a completely new state. So you could call this maybe a temperature change where we stay at within a reasonable boundary of temperature, and then it flips. And it's irreversible. So once that blue ball drops into the larger valley, it cannot return. It is an irreversible change. So imagine, please don't do this, imagine you're on your chair and you start to lean backwards. At some point, you will fall over. So you can control it for a bit of time, but eventually you will be in a very different situation, legs in the air, looking at the ceiling. That's effectively what we're talking about here with climatological scenarios. And there are a number of tipping points that happen. So let me just briefly describe what we can see here. Up the left-hand side, you have global average temperature changes. So we're currently here at about 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. If we keep to the Paris Agreement, which is a universal agreement to try and limit climate change, we move into this dark orange zone of around about 1.5 to 2 degrees. And if we look at the current trajectories of where we're going, then we're somewhere closer to 3 degrees up here, so in the darker red, sorry. And along here, we can see a number of different tipping points. So we're already starting to see a huge change in coral reef dieback. So we're getting to the stage that temperatures, global average temperatures, are now meaning that when coral dies away, it will not return. If we move across, you've got some of the ice sheets melting, both in the Antarctic, but also in Greenland. Again, ice sheets, so ice on the land, melts, flows into the ocean. That not only leads to sea level rise, but that ice disappears and will not return, and we cannot bring that back once that tipping point has happened. But the one I want to focus on is this one here. It's got a long name, so it's the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC for short. Please just remember the acronym for now. So what is AMOC? AMOC is basically the flow of ocean currents, but focusing on what's happening in the Atlantic. So I'll just take you through this. We have a surface flow of ocean currents that moves from the tropics, so in the Caribbean, up towards the UK, bringing warmer waters. And that effectively makes the UK have quite a temperate climate, warmer climate than it would for many other parts, many other places at a similar latitude to us. So that helps us to keep that temperate climate, keep us warmer for where we are in the world. That surface warm current moves a little bit further north and begins to cool. It also becomes more saline, it becomes more salty, which makes it denser, and eventually it sinks deep into the ocean as a cold, dense ocean current. And that's the blue returning south again. So you have this flow of warm air, warm ocean at the surface. It then sinks as a much denser fluid and comes back towards the equator at much lower levels in the ocean. And you can see that happening elsewhere in the world, but the particular focus is here in the Atlantic. So we know that the AMOC, the circulation, is slowing because we are putting much more fresh water from the ice melt in Greenland, for example. But what happens if it collapsed completely? If we lost that flow of warm water that keeps our temperate climate? So on the left here would show you a typical February towards the end of our winter months. If the AMOC did collapse, we would see the ice that would normally just form to around Greenland and to the north of Canada. That would actually come much further south. So we would see ice forming in our oceans to the northwest of Scotland and coming down the North Sea to cover most of the eastern coast of England. We would see ice forming. We'd also see freezing winters where temperatures get down to -20 in places like London here, or even colder if you go further north. But it wouldn't be cold all the time. Our climate is warming, so we would see hot summers, hotter than we've even had to date. So we've reached 40 degrees Celsius in the UK. So we could see, temperatures getting even higher than that, 40 plus across England and Wales, and then a little bit cooler as you go further north, but really high temperatures. Our infrastructure isn't built for a climate like that, going from the heat and the extreme cold that we may get if AMOC collapses. How would we produce food in this country? So we'd become much more reliant on importing food from elsewhere because it would be a real challenge to grow food when temperatures get down that cold in winter and get that high in the summer. And tipping points are really, they are really high impact changes in our climate that are irreversible. And as I mentioned before I came to this is something I don't feel is communicated as widely to the public. And I think this, it's a bit of a doom and it's a bit of a shock kind of message, but I do think sometimes that's needed. We also cover on the course how to communicate in a way that's effective. So there's a couple of examples here, and I just point your eye to the headlines. So they're both talking about extreme heat and the impact that it's having on accident and emergency units, or triggering climate warnings. And if you can read the article on the left-hand side, it talks about, this extreme, the impact that's having, the negative approach. Yet you've got two pictures that are very happy and jolly and children enjoying the sunshine and the heat. So the message that's written in the headline and the article is not reflected by the image itself. And that, I think, detracts then your eye. You see it as a celebration rather than an issue. So it's about how we use words, but also how we use images. Okay, so that's, I've covered the areas about education. I just want to go on now to empower. So we have taken a lot of people through our training. We started with broadcast meteorologists because they were the group who needed to be upskilled quickly to go on and talk about climate change. But we've also upskilled journalists, editors, graphic designers. We've gone out to community leaders, local government. We've even educated dioceses. Anybody who has an audience in front of them who is asking questions around climate change and wants to talk about this subject with more confidence, we're happy to support them. So some examples on the left. This is Laura Tobin. She's the weather presenter at Good Morning Britain on ITV. Some of you may tune into that. Straight after the training, she was taking some of the graphics, some of the information that we gave her. She was sharing this to her audience, again, much bigger audience than I can reach. She's become a climate ambassador. This is her when she became a fellow of the Royal Meteorological Society. She's out there. She's really wanting to talk about meteorology and the impact of climate change. She's even written a book to help people to think about how they can make changes, subtle changes to their life to help save our planet. On the right-hand side, and I'm hoping this video is going to work, is a little clip. So this is Matt Taylor from BBC Weather. They do quite a lot on their online platform, but they do a lot on social. So this is a TikTok video that he produced. He was just out walking his dog one day in January. It was particularly cold. You can see that certainly from the picture here. But we were just reporting that it had been the hottest 2024 on record. So, you've got that kind of juxtaposition, I guess, of information. Extreme heat going on, but it's cold. How can you have both? So let me see if I can get this video to work.
sea, and fewer in the way of colder spells. In fact, already here in the UK, there's around a fortnight fewer days with temperatures below freezing than there perhaps was in the 60s, 70s and 80s.
So they take that information, they package it up in a way that's accessible to a much wider audience, and they get it out there. And as I say, he was out walking his dog one morning, put that video together. It was out a few hours later, getting that message out. Okay, I'm going to now do a couple of slides to try and empower you. So I hope you can take this away and influence you to maybe a call to action. So the first slide is thinking about how you can influence systems. And my second slide is much more about individual behavioural change. So you can make changes to systems by using your voice. And your voice is really powerful. I really hope you go away from this presentation and have a conversation, either with people here over a drink after this, or with friends, colleagues, family when you leave here. So use your voice. Talk about maybe some of the examples that I've shown. Maybe even think about having that conversation about how there are positive benefits if we can tackle climate change. There are other benefits, like we'll see a reduction in pollution, for example. We'll have much healthier lifestyles. You may want to focus on nature, for example, that we get more green spaces, or there's an opportunity for green jobs. Some of you may be happier to go even further and actually start to pick up when there's misinformation. So you might challenge somebody if they say something that you feel is incorrect. You might want to challenge that, but have that conversation. And I think those of you that have children and grandchildren, we notice that there is climate anxiety in younger people. A lot of that is because they want to have that conversation. They want that knowledge. They want to talk about it. And the anxiety is there because they don't have that. So do engage in that conversation. So your voice is powerful. So is your vote. Vote for a party that actually has climate on their agenda. They have policies that are climate focused, have a green agenda. Or get in touch with your local councillor, your MP, somebody that you can write to, a local mayor, for example, to ask them to step up to the challenge of climate change. Use your money. So think about where your money is invested. Think about your pension. There are subtle changes that you can make that don't have a major impact on your day-to-day life, but can actually make a big difference. So where is that money invested? Where is your pension invested? There are many more options out there that are looking at green financing. Ask those questions. There's also a lot of community work out there. So go and find out local communities that are working in climate, in nature. Take a look and see what's out there and go and join those communities. And at work, go and ask, have a conversation at work. What is your organisation doing to reduce its carbon footprint? What is it doing to introduce kind of climate-friendly policies at work? Ask those questions. Because when we all act together, then we'll start to see those systems changing. And that's really important. This slide we would also include on the training, and I'll just take you through it. We'll start on the right-hand side first of all, because I think there's a real misunderstanding about where the most impactful changes are that will have an impact on mitigating climate change. So typically, an average person in the UK has an annual carbon footprint of about 8.5 tonnes of carbon per year. If you're very rich, it will be probably double that. And if you're living in poverty, then it's probably about 2 tonnes. So there's a real difference in equity depending on your income as to what your carbon footprint is. But on average, it's about 8.5. If we want to keep on target to stay within warming of 1.5, and that's becoming much, much more challenging as time goes on, by 2030, so in about 4 years' time, we have to have reduced that average from 8.5 down to 2.5. So that's the kind of change we need to see. On the left-hand side, I show you examples of how you can reduce your carbon footprint. So, for example, you could decide to become completely car-free and just use walk or use a bicycle or use public transport. Or you could swap your petrol and diesel car for an electric vehicle. Either of those would save you about 2 tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions every year. If we come down, again, just giving you a feel for a long-haul return flight, so from here, say, to the US and back, is about 1.7 tonnes. So if you just reduce one long-haul flight a year, you'd save 1.7. We're not talking about not flying at all, but a reduction will make a saving of that amount. Really easy. Switch your energy supplier to a renewable, 100% renewable. Fairly easy to do. That would save you 1.6 tonnes per year. And the list goes on. So you can see refurbishing and renovating your house, so making it more insulated. Again, that's about 0.9 tonnes. You could move to a more plant-based diet. Again, 0.8. Implement a heat pump to heat your home. Again, around about 0.8. So you can see all these start to add up quite quickly. I put down in the bottom, and we highlight this every time. So recycling is a good thing, but it's not going to reduce your carbon footprint. So recycling will only save you about 0.01 tonnes of carbon dioxide per year. So please carry on recycling, but it's not going to help your carbon footprint. And I think a lot of people feel, well, I recycle, I'm doing my bit, and that's enough. It won't help reducing your carbon footprint. Okay, so I've hopefully engaged you, hopefully educated you, and I'm really hoping I've empowered you to go away and do something. Have a conversation about this, maybe take some action, having listened to what I've said. The next 2 slides, I just want to take you quickly through some of the other activities that we do. I'm not going to go through these in detail. So we produce a lot of books and reports and papers that help people to communicate around climate change. I have the book, if people want to have a quick look at it. So this was something we published actually a while ago, and it gives it away because it was Prince of Wales, who's now King Charles, who co-authored this book a few years ago. But it's a ladybird book. It's a really accessible book to help people to understand climate change. We produce opinion pieces. So again, there's some links here, and hopefully people can get to have a look at these links in slower time if you're interested. We produce briefing papers, jargon busters to help people to understand some of the terminology around climate. And we produce toolkits to help particularly scientists communicate about climate change. We do a lot on education and outreach. We do so much media. And as I said at the beginning, we do a lot of communicating around climate change, but our audiences tend to be a lot smaller than those communicators we've trained. But we typically would do about 350 media interviews a year. That's about average 1 a day. It's pretty good for the size of our team. We have a Weather Photographer of the Year competition, and again, subtly bring through the narrative of climate with that, so you can engage with a much more public general audience who are interested in looking at weather images. We do a lot around careers in climate change, so thinking about green jobs. We do a lot in formal education in schools around climate change, working to make sure climate change is on the curriculum, then supporting teachers and resources to help bring that to life in the classroom. And then we do this literacy survey every year to see what that impact has had. We attend COP. So I was at Belém a few weeks ago. And again, we try and demystify what COP's about. So you can go and have a look at our page. There's blogs on there that will take you through what happened at this year's COP. We run a number of events. So there's one example here about how you might be able to change behaviour, how you can talk to people to have that impact, to make those changes. And then the final one, and I'd be interested to know if anybody in the room went to this event last Thursday. So this was the National Climate Emergency Briefing that took place at Central Hall in Westminster. If you did go, just pop your hand up quickly. I'm just interested to know. So this was pulled together, nobody. This was pulled together by a group of climate scientists to talk about climate change. There was a talk on tipping points, one of the areas I've just covered this evening as well. But it was also looking at what we can do across energy sector, the impact it has on our food supply. It was a really quite powerful and inspirational event. And the call to action, and if you go and have a look at the link that's on the slide, was to actually reach out to government, to MPs, to make sure there is that public awareness. As I say, I think there's a few things around climate change that just aren't out there in the public domain and need to be. So just to conclude, there are many challenges that we face in science communication. They are significant, but there are opportunities, and there's things that we can do as scientists to communicate, not just in climate change, but in your own areas of expertise. And the RMetS Society, I think we've shown this, that effective communication improves understanding, it strengthens trust, it enables citizens and society to make those informed decisions. And the training and support that you can give will help to increase both confidence but impact as well. Scientists and communicators can navigate through those difficult conversations, but they need the right tools to do that. I think it is hard. I do recognise that. People are nervous about having those conversations because, as I say, they're quite politicised. And constructive engagement is possible. So I would encourage you to go and have those conversations, even when it's quite a complex matter. And that communication can create change. So in closing, really just to say thank you for the opportunity. I hope I've engaged you. I hope I've educated you. I hope I've empowered you. And I'm happy to hang around either to take some questions now or to have a chat over a drink. Thank you.